If you've never made an apple galette before, think of it like a rustic apple pie but way easier. No fancy equipment or tools are needed for this delicious fall dessert. Let's get right into it. We're starting with 6 Granny Smith apples. Now I know you might be wondering, why Granny Smith specifically? It's because they're naturally more tart than sweet and they hold up way better when cooked. Other apples like Red Delicious or Gala turn to mush when you cook them, and nobody wants a mushy pie. Now instead of going crazy on the apples with a peeler, I'm going to show you a much easier method. Start by peeling the top and the bottom in a circular motion. I learned this technique while working the prep station at a super busy brunch restaurant. We would go through 50-pound bags of apples within a few days. Get those little caps off and then peel straight down from the top to the bottom. I do the same technique with potatoes too. It's just much more efficient and you don't end up with peels flying everywhere. Once those are all peeled, throw them into a bowl of water with the juice of half a lemon. This keeps them from browning while we work on the next step. Now we're going to core the apples. Instead of using one of those apple corer gadgets or trying to cut around the core, I'm going to cut the apple in half and use a melon baller to scoop out the core. This way it's just so much more efficient and you get way more usable apple. This also prevents wasting half the apple trying to cut around the core. Also, don't stress out if there's a little bit of peel left near the top and the bottom. It's not going to hurt anything. You can scoop it out if it bothers you, but honestly it doesn't affect the final product much. Now we're going to slice the apple halves into large cubes, about a ½ an inch thick. We want chunks, not thin slices, because we want the apples to still have some texture after they're baked. If you go too thin, they just disappear and become really mushy. All these apple chunks are going to go into a pot along with 4 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 3/4 cup of brown sugar, a spice mix consisting of 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/4 teaspoon of allspice, 1/8 teaspoon of ginger, and 1 teaspoon and 1/4 of cinnamon. Lastly, add in a teaspoon of lemon juice and mix this all together until everything's well combined. Now we're going to let this sit for at least 30 minutes. What's going to happen is the sugar is going to pull out all the juices of the apples, and that juice is going to become our sauce later on. So make sure not to skip this step. While we let the apples sit, we're going to work on our galette dough. This is the same pie dough I use for all my pie-like pastries, and it works great for everything. Into a large bowl, we're going to add 2½ cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 2 tablespoons of sugar. A trick I learned for extra flaky pie dough is to put 2 sticks of butter into the freezer at least 30 minutes up to overnight so they become extra cold. This prevents the butter from quickly melting into the dough, and it gives you those super flaky layers. Instead of cutting the butter into the flour or using a food processor, I like to grate it on the large holes of a grater. This gives you way more even distribution, and it's really easy to do when the butter's frozen. After all the butter is shredded, fluff it up with the flour mixture, making sure it all gets coated. This is going to prevent our butter from clumping up later on. Now take some ice water and slowly drizzle it in while stirring with a wooden spoon. We're using cold ingredients and moving quickly so that the butter doesn't melt. The solid pieces of butter melt in the oven and create those flaky layers. So if all the butter melts now, the crust will turn out super dense. Once the dough starts looking like a crumbly, shaggy dough, switch to your hands. I'm flouring my hands first so it doesn't stick, and then we're going to begin kneading by lifting and pushing the dough until it comes together into a ball. It might feel like it's not coming together at first, but just keep on kneading. Don't add more water unless your dough is super dry. It'll eventually come together. Once your dough ball is formed, we're going to wrap it up in plastic wrap and press it down a little bit so it's easier to roll out later on. Into the fridge it goes for at least 30 minutes, or you can do this the night before. Now our apples have released a ton of liquid after sitting in that sugar mixture. This is exactly what we want. Now we're going to put the pot of apples on medium-high heat until it comes to a simmer. Once it's simmering, cover it and let it cook for 5 minutes. This is going to release even more liquid from the apples, and it's going to start breaking them down just slightly. After 5 minutes, turn off the heat and remove the apples with a slotted spoon. We want to leave as much liquid as possible because we're going to turn that liquid into a sauce that binds everything together. To thicken the apple juice, I'm going to make a cornstarch slurry consisting of 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, 3 tablespoons of bourbon, and a splash of reserved apple juice. The bourbon adds this incredible depth of flavor, but if you don't want to use it, you can just add more apple juice instead. Add this slurry to the reserved apple juice and turn the heat back on to medium-high heat. Bring it to a simmer and let it cook for 1 to 2 minutes until it becomes this thick, jam-like consistency. Turn off the heat and add in the apples and give everything a good mix to combine. Then add in 6 tablespoons of butter. This brings the whole filling together and adds some richness. Also, don't forget to add in a pinch of salt to balance out all that sweetness. Now our apple pie filling is ready to go, but it's still really hot, so we're going to let it cool down a bit while we roll out the dough. Flour your work surface really well, then flour the top of the dough. This recipe makes 2 8-inch galettes, so I'm going to split the dough in half. Flour your hands and the rolling pin so nothing sticks, and then begin rolling out one of the halves of the dough. Every now and then flip the dough and add more flour to prevent it from sticking. We're looking for it to get to about 1/4 inch thick. Once it's at the right thickness, we're going to brush off the excess flour from both sides. You don't want any raw flour in your finished galette. Now I'm trimming off the edges to form a rough circle. It doesn't have to be perfect, as we're going to trim it again later on. But do save those scraps. You can make some cool snacks with them later on. Roll the dough around the rolling pin to transfer it onto a parchment-lined sheet pan. Now the apple filling goes right in the middle, leaving about 2 inches from the edges. Then we're going to trim the dough again so that the edges are a little bit more uniform. I'm taking the edges and then folding them towards the middle, creating this overlapping rustic look. This is what makes a galette a galette. Now comes my favorite part. It's like taking a little art break. Brush some egg wash all around the galette. I like to use just 1 egg scrambled really well for my egg wash. I'm making sure to get into all those little nooks and crannies so it browns evenly. This gives you that beautiful golden color. Now sprinkle some coarse brown sugar all around the edges. I'm using demerara here, but turbinado works great too. This gives the crust some extra color and gives it that amazing crunch. Into the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 35 minutes it goes. While this bakes, you can either make another galette with the extra dough, or you can make mini apple pies by cutting 3-inch circles and filling them with the remaining apple mixture. I actually have a short showing how to make those up here if you'd like to check it out. And here we are. Look at this beauty. Smells incredible, but let it cool for at least 10 minutes because that apple filling is like molten hot lava right now. I'm cutting this like a pizza into 8 pieces. Look at that flaky crust and all those perfectly cooked apples. This is what a galette should look like. Rustic but beautiful. Let's give it a try. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The crust is buttery and flaky, the apples have that perfect texture with just enough sweetness and those warm spices. Way better than any store-bought pie, and honestly it's easier to make than a traditional apple pie. If you like today's recipe, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!